Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the third season of Art Troublecast. Today's episode will be about the illnesses and mental disorders of artists. I've been reading a lot of artists' biographies lately, and I'm starting to notice a disturbing pattern. Many of them suffered from various mental disorders. Sometimes I feel like their suffering was some kind of catalyst for their creativity.
Yes, it's a very common phenomenon. You can almost get the impression that the intensity of the emotions they had to deal with gave them access to deeper layers of imagination. Vincent van Gogh is probably the most famous example.
Yes, Van Gogh is a classic. Bipolar disorder, possible symptoms of schizophrenia, and severe depression episodes. And although he sold only one painting in his entire life, today his work is considered groundbreaking. His brush strokes, swelling colors, it's like a visual record of a state of mind.
Exactly. He didn't paint reality, he experienced it on canvas. And it's not just a matter of technique, but also emotion. You look at the Sterenite and you can almost feel that inner trembling.
Or Whitfield with Crows. It's a painting of pain. And interestingly, he painted just before committing suicide. It's incredible that a man so mentally devastated was able to create something so powerful.
It's fascinating and tragic at the same time. It was similar with Edvard Munch. He himself said that illness was his greatest inspiration. He suffered from anxiety, depression, and also had psychotic episodes. The scream, it's not just an internal scream, it's an image of internal terror.
Yes, and his whole life was saturated with trauma. The death of his mother and sister, a strict father. And yet, or maybe because of that, his art was ahead of its time. It was emotional, expressive, raw.
And now think about Sylvia Plath. Maybe it's not painting, but poetry can also be a career of emotions. Her The Belger is literary vivisection of depression, and the diaries, well, there you can see her struggles in black and white.
Yes, Plath is probably one of the most moving examples. An extraordinary talent, but also enormous suffering. She was diagnosed with clinical depression, tried suicide several times, and finally success. And did you know that just before her death, she wrote her most powerful poems?
Yeah, those from the volume Ariel, as if she know it was the end. It's painful that sometimes the greatest creative power comes at the moment of the greatest decay.
And it's impossible not to mention Kurt Cobain. He also struggled with depression, had ADHD, and possibly borderline. And his lyrics, after all, Something in the Way is almost a confession of someone who no longer wants to be a part of the world.
Exactly, Nirvana in general was the voice of a generation of suffering, anxiety, lack of belonging. It wasn't a pose. Cobain really suffered, and drugs only depended that state. His death was a blow to the entire alternative scene.
You're right. And if you look even more broadly, Ludwig van Beethoven also had his demons. Although no one diagnosed him using modern methods, today it is said that he may have suffered from affective disorders, depression, mood swings, outbursts of anger.
And yet, or perhaps because of that, he created such emotional music. His later piano sonates are full of drama and melancholy. as if music were his therapy.
And that's what moves me the most, how suffering can transform into something beautiful. But isn't that a paradox? That often the greatest masterpieces come from pain.
It's a paradox, but probably also an expression of the truth about human nature. We are most honest in suffering, and art is honestly emotional exposure. Look at Frida Kahlo. She suffered physically and mentally, but each of her works is a kind of self therapy.
Frida, yes, her paintings are brutally honest. The body is dismembered, the heart is exposed, literally and figuratively. Illness, miscarriages, betrayals, all poured out on canvas. And despite all this suffering, or because of it, her art is incredibly powerful.
Same with Virginia Woolf. Her prose is not only a formal experiment, but also a record of living with an affective disorder. She had episodes of mania, but also of deep depression. In letters to her husband, she wrote about voices and fears that consumed her.
She ultimately couldn't handle them, but she left behind To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway, books that still move and inspire. Sometimes I have the impression that artists who suffer mentally have access to some inner world that is close to the rest.
Yeah, maybe it's a matter of intensity of feeling. Such person cannot remain indifferent to reality. Everything hurts, moves, tears them apart, and the only relief is to put it on a paper, canvas, sound.
But at the same time, it raises a question. Is suffering necessary to create great art? Can one be a brilliant creator without pain?
That's a difficult question. I think you don't necessarily have to suffer, but the intensity of the experiences. And people with mental disorders often experience everything more strongly, more deeply. It can be a curse and a gift at the same time.
And maybe that's why art becomes a form of salvation for them. Although sometimes, as we see, even art is not enough to survive.
Unfortunately, Amy Winehouse, Robin Williams, the list goes on. And their talent was huge, but the struggle with themselves was even greater.
I remember reading William's statements about depression after his death. It's awful that someone who brought so much joy to others was so empty inside.
Because depression doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it's a mask, and artists often know how to hide perfectly behind their work. But it always reveals the truth, if only we know how to look.
And listen and read between the lines, between the brush strokes, between the notes. Because that's where the real story lies. Not only about art, but also about the man. Sometimes I wonder how many more such artists live in the shadows today. They create, fight their demons, but the world is only the end result, not the path they took.
Probably many mental illnesses are still heavily stigmatized, even though awareness is growing.
It's beautiful that more and more artists are now speaking openly about their experiences. It makes young people who go through similar things feel like they're not alone.
And I think that's where the power of contemporary arts are. It not only shows aesthetics, but also opens the door to a conversation about the psyche, about suffering, about the healing process. It's not just art for art's sake, but a tool for social awareness. And finally, let's remember that not every disease or disorder is visible at the first glance. Let's not judge others because we don't know what they're struggling with inside. And one more thing, mental illness is not shameful, and asking for help is courage. Thank you for today and see you next week.